Welcome to another Ultralight Airplane Design video from the Ultralight Airplane Workshop. In this video, we're going to continue with the video I recently did on thoughts on the instrument touch panel that I would like to put on the UWS-4 Ultralight airplane. In the last video, we talked about the main display, so that would be the flight data display. So things that you would normally be looking at while you're flying. In this video, we're actually going to cover the secondary kind of data. So that'd be things like engine data, setting up your comms, functioning of your electrical system, and how to set up the display. Let's get to it. And this here is just kind of an indication of the things I'd like to do for engine data. So if you had maybe an engine warning, or you want to come over and look at your engine data for a while, you're in nice and steady cruise flight, you want to come over and check out how your engine's doing. If you had a couple of cylinders, you'd have cylinder 1 and cylinder 2 head temperatures, 1 and 2 exhaust gas temperatures. So if you have an oil lubrication system in your engine, you'd have oil temperature, oil pressure. If you have a coolant in your system, you'd have coolant temperature. You'd also have things like RPM. Now, I've taken up a lot of space with these. You could actually make these smaller and put an RPM gauge in here, probably another vertical one. Another thing I want to have is hours. This may not necessarily be here on the engine. It'll probably be more like in the flight area. I might have an hours meter. Right now I just have it here on the engine, but probably really belongs more over somewhere in the flight area, or maybe another tab somewhere. Now we could do it separately. We could do like engine hours since overhaul and airframe hours. You could actually separate them out. That'd be pretty easy to do. Then you have to have a button for when you do engine overhaul to click that and start it again. That's something I'm going to have to think about a little bit more. But these gauges work just like the airspeed indicator that we looked before. We have a little slider here that goes up and down, shows you what the actual value is. We have a green normal operating area. We have a yellow warning area. Then we have a red alarm area. So let's say we're up here in flight and we have an exhaust gas temperature that goes too high. And we start getting an audio warning, and we start getting an indication over here. We might make it yellow if it's a warning, flashing red if it's an alarm over here in this area. We know we need to come down here. And then whichever one's alarmed would be flashing, or whichever one is in warning. If one of them is alarmed, it'll be a flashing red, so you can immediately go to it. If it's just warning, I don't know if I'll flash it or not. I might, so you know which one's in the warning area. And you could have more than one in the warning area, of course. I just thought of something. It would be nice to have maybe a button over in here that's silence alarm or silence warning, so it doesn't keep going off in your ear and bothering you. That'd probably be a good thing to happen. And then if your alarm or warning stops, or all of them stop, then that would reset this down in here. So the next time you get a warning or alarm, it would go off again. Right here, this is a pretty simple window. Normally for an ultralight, unless you're flying in a controlled airport or an airport with a common frequency, you're probably not going to be using a radio. But if you have a way of connecting your radio up to this flight management system, then in here you could turn the radio on and off. You could set frequency 1, frequency 2, set the volume on frequency 1 separate from 2, set your squelch. If you want to have music also in your system, you have Bluetooth, turn that off or on, and set the volume for that. And then if you want to have a set of frequencies, for example, when you press on this, you can either enter their frequency directly, 123.75, or I could have a list of known frequencies, and you would go through the list and select which one you want. And if you want to add to that list, you could add a frequency by clicking this button, and then it would pop up the list, and you could add in a new frequency along with its ID. That's just an idea here. I haven't put a lot of thought into this, but at least I've captured some of the ideas I want to have. And then for electrical system, I'm assuming at the maximum, we're probably going to have a battery and a generator / alternator. Although if you want to have solar, that could probably be added too. But I'm going to have the current and voltage for the battery, current and voltage for the generator. And these can be different if you have some electrical items that are using some electricity. So that's why you're going to have some differences here. And I could even have a little something here that calculates how much is being used. Don't know if I'll do that or not. You might have strobes out on your wingtips. You can turn that on or off. Nav lights might turn that on or off. A beacon. Now, of course, strobes and nav lights, you can only use a half hour after sunset, and then you have to be on the ground for an ultralight here in the US. And I should also mention you can fly a half hour before sunrise too. So I doubt if we'll ever have a beacon, but you might have strobes or nav lights. So right now there's not much here in the electrical part. There'll probably more as I go. So now we get to the page that I am positive is going to have a whole lot more to it in the future. But I've captured some of what I want to do. I mentioned that some of our flight data, how we calculate it, will change based on weight. And so down here in settings, I have some of the weight things that can be set. For example, the empty weight of the airplane, weight of the pilot, weight of your baggage, that's any extra stuff you're carrying along, the volume of your fuel, and then this will go and calculate what the gross weight is. And it can also estimate fuel usage as you go. I have not yet decided if I want this to mean the total volume of your tanks, or if it means how much fuel it thinks it has left. I've not figured out what I want to do with that yet. But one of the pre-flight things would be to enter how much fuel you have and what the pilot weight would be and what your baggage weight would be. Empty weight you wouldn't normally change unless you had done some maintenance on the airplane. Which brings up another item. I'm probably going to have a security feature here on the settings window that some things anyone can change, which would be like pilot weight, baggage, fuel, if it's amount of fuel. And then some things only the person doing maintenance on it or the owner can change, would be like the empty weight. You'd only change this after you've maybe done some work on the airplane, take something off, add something on. You don't want just anyone to go here and fiddling with this and completely screwing up the values. And there's others like that here too. The units that are displayed on the various data points, like feet to meters, I'll let you switch between imperial and metric. Some of the things that are displayed, for example, on that engine tab, will depend on like the number of cylinders you have, whether you're internal combustion engine or electric, whether you have oil system or not, whether you have a coolant system. And again, these things would only be changed by someone who is authorized to work on the airplane and make changes. And that'd be like up here where I talked about the empty weight. So it'd have to be someone who has authorization code to get in here and change these. Whether you have GPS attached or not. So that's going to make a huge difference on some of the calculations. So again, this would be up here in this category. So it's whether it's installed or not. Now that brings up another point. Sometimes GPS will have a low quality signal for whatever reason. When that happens, the system has to be smart enough to know we can't rely on GPS, or we're just not getting GPS data, and make appropriate changes to the flight display as that's happening. And to let the user know that GPS isn't available, so we're just doing the best we can, or just not showing some data. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned yet, I want to have a slot on the instrument panel where I can plug in an SD card and record all the flight data for a flight. But once I do a flight, I don't necessarily want to keep all that flight data. I should have stored it on my computer somewhere already. So I want to be able to go and erase the flight data that's on there right before we start a flight. So that's what this little button here is for, is so go erase or reformat that SD card. If we don't have GPS, we might want to be able to set whatever our time is. So that's what this is for down here, to set the time, which of course would change this up here. And we might have more than one person flying this airplane. And so each person might want to have a slightly different set of flight data that's displayed up here on the main panel, or maybe even on the engine panel. So I would have a way of setting who's flying the airplane. And so, for example, I would click down here. Maybe there's a list of pilots. You probably wouldn't ever have more than 2 pilots, but I'll let you add as many as you want. You click on here, select whoever's flying the airplane, and so it'll change all these displays to whatever that person wants, their customized displays. If you want to add a new pilot, you come in here, click, add a new pilot. Of course, you want to be able to delete pilots too. I might have one kind of display for when I'm just going out around recreational flying, not doing any testing. I just want to enjoy myself. I might simplify my flight display a lot. But if I'm going out doing flight testing, and I want to collect all the data I can during the flight testing and see it visually, I might have a different profile down here that I click on. It says, Leon testing. So change it for a test flight. And there's potential for a lot more stuff over here. For example, I set on the flight display, I might be able to change whatever this bar display is over here on the right-hand side. I'll probably want a setting over here of a list of things that can be in the bar display. And then I might have a upper left-hand corner data, upper right-hand corner data, lower left, lower right. for this kind of data, so on. So I could change these, customize these from the settings display. I just haven't put them in here yet. And then lastly, on this last tab, which you wouldn't normally have available, and in fact, I could actually have a something here in this profile to turn this on or off, make it visible or not, whether I'm doing testing. But this would be more detailed, more granular data. For example, accelerometers in the X, Y, and Z directions, gyroscopic data in the X, Y, and Z directions, my latitude and longitude from GPS, height from the GPS, ground speed from the GPS. Also, I'm thinking of making my own pitot tube for detecting angle of attack. And so there's going to be different pressure points. There's going to be one up, one down, and one straight ahead. So each of these separate measurements I could detect here. So if I got a bug in one of the holes, I could actually come back here and look at the data and say, oh, this piece of data here on this top one suddenly went bad at some point in the flight. It's probably because I had a bug in there. And then, of course, static pressure. And then if there's ever something that goes wrong with the airplane, at least during the testing portion of it, I want to measure things like the direction of the stick, fore and aft and left and right, and the position of the rudder pedals, whether I'm pushing on the port side or the starboard side. And then I want to be able to compare that with the deflection on my flying surface. So the port aileron, starboard aileron, how far they've been deflected. The elevons back on the tail, how far they've been deflected. Actually, instead of elevon on these three, that should say flaps. So there's a port flap, a starboard flap, and a center flap, how much they're deflected. And what I'll do is I'll put potentiometers on there so I can measure how far they're deflected. And also, how far is the throttle pushed in percentage from 0 to 100. And if I have a mixture, if I'm able to control that, how far that's pushed in or out, 0 to 100. So I want to capture all this data when I'm doing flight testing to see if there's a problem. And also, this is acting as a black box. So if I ever have an accident and someone wants to do some investigation, I'll actually have all this data that someone can go and look at and see what went wrong. Because it'll be on the SD card, it can be pulled out. It'll look like a spreadsheet, so you could just load it straight into a spreadsheet and look at all the data. All the data will be time-stamped at probably, it could be 10th of a second increments. And it won't be just this data, all the data, flight data, engine data, whatever comms was, electrical data, all that stuff will be saved. The settings will be saved. So all that will be in that log on the SD card. So as you can see, for everything that I've talked about, that's way overkill for an ultralight. You don't need hardly any of that. You really need basically three things: airspeed, angle of attack, and the skid indicator. I think those three will normally keep you safe. You don't probably need the rest of it. And in fact, with the way I plan on doing settings here, you could set it up so that's all you're showing. And then things that were probably nice to have would be like exhaust gas temperature and cylinder head temperature. So with just those 5 pieces of data, you've got what most ultralight, or even a little bit more than most ultralight airplanes have. So as you can see, there's been a lot of mission creep here. It's a lot of fun to think about what to do. So I doubt that I'll do all this. I do want to still, though, capture flight data. After a flight, I want to be able to come back and do some analysis on the data and make sure the airplane performed the way I thought it would, or the way it should perform. Or if there's issues, I might be able to figure out what was going wrong, which I might not have been able to figure out while I was flying the airplane, but the data may show me what the issues are. Okay, so there's certainly more to talk about here. There's electrical system, there's sensors, and there's the data system for getting data from the sensors into the panel. So look forward to those videos, guys. I don't know when they'll come out. I'm probably due at least 1 or 2 more videos that include some of that stuff here before it gets warm and I can get back out in the shop. But I am going to bear the cold a little bit and go out and see if I can get some more of these rib design videos done. Well, guys, until next time.